Hi, it's a pleasure to have you here on our channel. Please subscribe, leave a like, and hit the bell for more videos. It was just another Tuesday morning beneath the city. The kind of morning that wrapped itself in the dull echo of tired footsteps and the low hum of people trying to get somewhere fast. Down in the concrete veins of the subway system, where the air carried the scent of metal, motion, and mystery, a voice rose above the noise. Not a voice on a loudspeaker. Not an announcement or a warning. It was a song familiar, melancholic, carried by a guitar that had seen better days and a man whose eyes held the dust of dreams too long shelved. He was a subway singer. Not famous, not even trying to be. He sang because that's where the music led him. Down here, into the passageways where people moved like river currents, where no one looked up, where life passed in blurs. His stage was a patch of tiled floor near the central station SCBZS Corridor. His audience. Fleeting, anonymous. But sometimes, amidst the blur, faces stuck with him. Especially hers. He first noticed her on a Wednesday. He was midway through a melody, an old ballad with a soft, aching chorus when she walked by. She didn't stop, didn't smile, didn't make eye contact, just dropped a coin into his open guitar case and kept walking. But something in the way she moved, something in the quiet certainty of her steps, left a trace. The song faded. He packed up for the day, but he remembered her. The next day she appeared again. Different outfit, same timing, same song, same coin in the case, no words, no gestures, and then gone. By the third time, it was no longer coincidence. It was always during that same song, and always the same woman. He began to look forward to it, not the coin. Subway singers knew not to expect riches, but the moment, the silent ritual they were building. Like a whisper between strangers, stitched into melody. She had that kind of presence that made you feel something, even when she said nothing. Her hair was always loosely tied back, like she didn't care for perfection. Her coat, beige, a little worn, swayed as she walked, and sometimes she carried a paperback book tucked under her arm, its spine cracked from love. She never looked directly at him, but once. Just once. He swore he caught the tiniest smile as she passed. It wasn't love at first sight. Not exactly. It was curiosity, intrigue, the kind of thing that sits in your gut and doesn't let go. He began to wonder about her life. Was she on her way to work? Was that one song special to her somehow? Maybe it reminded her of something or someone. Or maybe, just maybe, it reminded her of him. It was a foolish thought, he told himself. He didn't even know her name. But when you live your days surrounded by strangers, the ones who return become meaningful. So, he played that song more often. At first, just once a day, then twice. Then he made it the centerpiece of his routine. The others noticed. Fellow musicians, commuters who saw him daily. A few raised eyebrows. One older man once dropped a coin and said, "That one again." Huh, with a knowing smile. He just nodded. He never told anyone. The woman, meanwhile, remained consistent. Never early, never late. She appeared when the chords hit the second verse, coin in hand, eyes forward, and then, like a dream interrupted, she was gone. He began calling her chorus girl in his mind, not because she sang, but because her arrival always synced with the chorus of that song. And though he never spoke to her, he began composing lyrics in his journal that imagined her story. He imagined she was a dancer who'd lost her stage, a poet who'd forgotten her lines, a traveler who missed the train and decided to stay. He imagined her laughing. He imagined her crying. He imagined her hearing the song one day and realizing it was about her. The truth, of course, was that he knew nothing. But when a stranger becomes a rhythm in your days, your heart fills in the silence. Then one morning, she didn't come. He played the song. He waited. No coin, no coat, no book. He played it again, slower this time. Still, nothing. He stayed longer than usual, scanning every passerby with a hope he didn't want to admit. Maybe she was sick. Maybe she took another route. Maybe it was over. For the rest of the day, he couldn't shake the feeling that something had been taken from him. Not just a moment, not just a listener, but a story he wasn't ready to stop writing. The next day, she wasn't there either. By the third day, the melody didn't sound the same. He played it anyway, because hope, like music, lingers. But the silence between the notes grew louder. Days turned into a week into 2. He stopped playing the song. It hurt too much. The guitar felt heavier in his hands, and the subway colder. Then, exactly 3 weeks from the last time he saw her, he opened his case after a song, not that song, and found something folded inside. A note. His heart jumped. It was a small piece of paper tucked neatly beneath a crumpled bill. No name, no greeting, just one sentence. If you truly want to find me, play that song one last time and wait. He read it 3 times before he let himself breathe. Was it really from her? It had to be. It had to be. He stared at the note for a long time. The subway hummed around him. Trains came and went. People rushed past, and for the first time in years, he felt like the next song he played might change everything. But was he ready? Was he ready to wait? And more importantly, was he ready to let go of the version of her he'd built in his mind? The silence between songs. That was where the questions lived, and soon he would have to answer them. There are some moments that slip by unnoticed, fading into the rhythm of the everyday. And then there are those that wedge themselves into your memory, even if you don't understand why. A coin falling into a guitar case. A glance that doesn't last more than a heartbeat. A woman walking through a crowd and somehow becoming the only thing that matters. He didn't know her name, didn't know where she came from, but the moment she disappeared from his routine, the world lost a beat. It was like a metronome had been quietly ticking in his life, and now it had stopped. Mid-measure, the note left behind haunted him. Simple, direct, almost cruel in its ambiguity. If you truly want to find me, play that song one last time. And wait one last time. And wait. He didn't know what scared him more. The possibility that she would never come, or the possibility that she would. But before that final song, before the decision to wait and face whatever truth lay at the end of the melody, his mind couldn't help but wander back. Back to every moment that had led to that folded note. Every coin, every look, every unanswered question. It had started as nothing. A song played like any other, one of many in his set. But she had changed it. Her presence had altered the melody, giving it new weight, new meaning, and it all came down to such a small gesture. A coin dropped with precision, never hesitation. There were countless others who tossed him change. Kids tugged by mothers' arms, businessmen distracted by their phones, tourists pretending not to record him. But none of them returned with rhythm. None of them synchronized with a specific song. None of them gave him reason to anticipate a face in the crowd. She had become a constant in a world of variables. He could still remember the first day she passed. He had almost missed her. He was deep in the second verse, fingers aching from the cold strings, lost in the story the song was telling. And then a flicker, the sound of a coin hitting cloth. His gaze lifted instinctively, but she was already past. A blur, a breeze. It wasn't until the third or fourth time that he began to memorize her. The way her scarf always seemed loosely tied, as if she'd thrown it on without checking a mirror. The small charm that dangled from her book bag zipper. A silver treble clef, which had once caught the light just enough to glimmer. The way her pace never faltered, not once, even as she passed by a man singing her song. He had wondered then whether it was the music she liked or something else. Maybe the words held a memory for her. Maybe the melody reminded her of someone she had lost. Or maybe she simply liked the tone of his voice, that quiet ache he never managed to hide when he played. He often wondered if people could hear the tiredness in him, the thin edge of hope that clung to each lyric. He had once been on bigger stages, bars, clubs. He'd dreamed of open mics turning into record deals, of demo tapes passed to someone who mattered. But time had a way of wearing down the sharp corners of ambition. His name never made it past the small posters, the set lists printed in fonts too small to read. And so the subway became his stage, a place of echoes and footsteps, a place where no one came to listen. And yet she had come back again and again, never speaking, never smiling fully, but always with that same song. He started calling it her song. It wasn't his best composition. In fact, it wasn't even one he'd written. Just a cover of an old folk tune, rewritten 100 times over by buskers before him. But there was something in the melody that hung in the air like smoke. Something wistful, a longing that never fully resolved, even in the final chord. It was a song about roads not taken, about voices not heard. And maybe that was why it called her. Maybe that's why he felt like they were connected, even if only in the silence between verses. He remembered one day in particular, a rainy afternoon, the kind where umbrellas collided and subway tiles glistened with footprints. He had been ready to call it early. The rain brought fewer listeners, fewer coins. His fingertips were raw, his strings damp. But then, just before he packed up, he played that song just once. She arrived like clockwork. But this Chimi, something was different. She hesitated, just for a second. Her hand paused above his case. Her eyes, normally fixed ahead, flicked toward him. It was so fast, he almost missed it. But in that moment, their eyes met, and he saw it recognition. Like she'd been avoiding it. Like she didn't mean to let it happen. She dropped the coin and turned away quickly, but he had seen the shift. The moment where the glance became something more. After that, It changed for him. He began to perform for her. His voice softened during that song. He stretched the notes, lingered longer in the chorus, hoping she'd stay, even just 1 second more. Sometimes he imagined she did. Sometimes he played with his eyes half closed, just to pretend she was still there. And then, just like that, she vanished. For 3 long weeks, he played in limbo. Some days, he convinced himself he had imagined it all. The connection, the look, the unspoken pull. Maybe she had moved. Maybe it had all been in his head, a romantic illusion crafted in the absence of a real audience. But then the note appeared, folded and silent and cruelly beautiful. If you truly want to find me, play that song one last time. And wait. The subway corridors had never felt so alive. He read it every night, every morning, trying to decipher the intent behind those few words. Was it a goodbye? A test? A trap? He walked through the city above the tunnels, hoping to spot her among the crowds. But the world above was too vast, too noisy. Down below, her absence was deafening. He began rehearsing the song again in private. He hadn't played it since the day she stopped appearing. It felt unfamiliar now, like a memory too long neglected. The lyrics stuck in his throat, the chords felt heavy, but slowly it came back, and with it, the emotion he had buried. He remembered how it felt to sing for someone who might actually be listening, someone who had turned his routine into a ritual, someone who had made a coin, in a glance, feel like an entire conversation. So now, standing once again in his usual spot, guitar in hand, case open, commuters swarming past, he faced the choice she had left him, to play one last time and wait. He didn't know what would happen, didn't know if she would come. But somewhere in the silence between the strings, in the space between courage and vulnerability, he knew one thing for certain. If he didn't play, he'd never know. And so, with a breath deeper than he'd taken in weeks, he tightened the strap, adjusted his fingers on the fretboard, and began the song. Not for the crowd, not for the coins, not for his pride, but for her, for the look they had shared, for the notes she had left, and for the chance, however small, that somewhere out there, in the echo of the underground, she was waiting to. The first note echoed through the corridor like a whisper returning home. The moment he strummed the opening chord, something in the air shifted, as if the very station had been holding its breath, waiting for him to find the courage to begin again. The song, her song, filled the underground with the kind of fragile beauty that only exists when someone plays with their entire soul. It was raw. It was imperfect, but it was honest. Every word was a confession. Every chord, a piece of longing. He had played it countless times before, but never like this. This time, he was listening to. The station pulsed with movement around him. Trains hissed, announcements crackled. Shoes clicked over tile. But none of it mattered. His world had narrowed into the space between each lyric. He wasn't just singing, he was waiting. Waiting for her. The crowd came and went like tides. Business suits, backpacks, laughter, yawning, exhaustion. No one stopped. Not really, not like she used to, in that quiet, subtle way that never called attention to itself. He played on. The song flowed through him like blood through veins that had been numb for too long. His voice, strained from emotion, didn't crack. It trembled, like a hand extended in hope. And though he was surrounded by hundreds of strangers, he felt profoundly alone, exposed, vulnerable. He finished the last note with a soft downstroke. No applause, no reaction, just silence. The kind of silence that wraps around you after a truth has been spoken. And then he waited. He kept his eyes up, scanning every face, every coat, every step, but she didn't come. Not during the final chord. Not immediately after. Not when the station emptied and refilled with the next train's arrival. He stood there, frozen, heart pounding, hands still curled in the ghost of the last chord. Was that it? Was she watching? Was this all just some poetic goodbye? She orchestrated leaving him to unravel the meaning behind her vanishing act. He didn't pack up. Not yet. He waited longer than he'd ever waited before. 5 minutes. 10. 20. Until the ache in his legs from standing gave way to the ache in his chest. And then he saw her, far down the corridor, walking slowly. No coin in her hand, no book under her arm, just her. She was watching him, directly, no longer avoiding his gaze, no longer pretending to be a stranger. She was still in a world of motion. And this Chimi, she walked toward him. Not past, not around. Toward, he couldn't move. He wasn't even sure he was breathing. Her steps were measured, but not hesitant. She looked different. Or maybe he was just seeing her clearly for the first time. The soft curve of her face, the glint in her eyes that spoke of secrets carried too long. Her expression wasn't a warm, exactly, it was searching, like she was studying him the same way he'd studied her. She stopped a few feet from him and smiled. It was small, delicate, but it was real. You kept playing, she said softly. Her voice was like the song itself, gentle, filled with something unspoken. He nodded, still too stunned to respond. I wasn't sure you would, she added. He blinked. You left a note. She gave a slight nod. I did? Why? She looked down at the case filled with forgotten coins and a few crumpled bills. Because I needed to know if you were singing for anyone, or just singing for me. He didn't understand at first. So, she continued, that song, she said, it's not just a song. It was my brother's favorite. He used to sing it with me, all the time, until one day he didn't. There was no need for her to explain what that meant. Loss has a way of filling in its own blanks. I stopped listening to music after that, she continued. Every note hurt. But then, one day, I passed through this station and heard you singing it, and I couldn't help it. I kept coming back. He swallowed the lump in his throat. Why didn't you ever say anything? She smiled again, a little more sadly. Because I didn't want to disrupt it. You didn't know me? I didn't want to project my grief onto your voice. I just needed to hear it, to remember. He sat down slowly, overwhelmed. I thought maybe you liked the song, or maybe you liked me. She laughed, not cruelly, but gently. I did. I do. But it started as something else. Healing. That melody was the only thing that reached me for months. He looked at her, really looked. This wasn't a fantasy. She wasn't a mystery anymore. She was real, human, fragile. Why stop coming? He asked. Because I was starting to come for you, not just the song, she said. And I didn't know if you were playing for anyone else. I was scared I'd imagined all of it. The glances, the timing, so I left a note. Juan Las Song Test. And if I didn't play it? He asked. She shrugged. Then maybe it wasn't meant to be. He laughed softly. That's a lot of pressure to put on a guy with a guitar and sore fingers. She laughed too. And for a moment, the weight lifted. So, she said, stepping closer, who were you playing for? He looked down at the strings, then back at her. At first, I didn't know, but somewhere between the chorus and the bridge, it became about you. She met his eyes. Good. He wasn't sure what happened next, whether it was him or her. But suddenly they were standing in the same space, no longer separated by music or silence or fear. Just two people in the middle of a subway station who had somehow found each other through grief, hope, and melody. You have a beautiful voice, she said. You have a beautiful silence, he replied. I heard it between the songs. She smiled again. Not small this time. Full, warm. The kind of smile that comes from being understood. They didn't kiss. Not yet. That would come later. Right now, they just stood there, listening to the hum of the city, the hush between trains, the space where once there had been only longing. And in that silence, something new began. Something unscripted, something real. There are moments in life that feel like endings, and yet, quietly, they become beginnings. Moments that seem too small to hold significance a coin. A look, a pause in a melody, but they echo far beyond the surface of what they are. And in the stillness after a final chord fades, a note left behind can become the doorway to everything that follows. The subway had emptied. The rush hour tide had pulled back, leaving only a handful of people scattered along the tiled corridors. The kind of stillness that only exists after noise has exhausted itself. He was still seated on his stool, guitar across his lap, case open, like a wound, collecting small gestures of kindness. But none of it mattered. Now not the tips, not the passing glances. Because she had come, and then, just as quickly, she had left again, but not into silence. This time, she had left him a note, not the first note, not the one that had asked him to play and wait. That one had been a spark in the dark. This one was something else entirely. She had written it as they stood facing each other after their first real conversation, after truths were shared and eyes locked in mutual vulnerability. It had all happened so fast, perhaps, but they both knew that the moments they had been living were anything but ordinary. Before leaving, she had said only, I'm not ready yet, but I want you to know something. Then she pulled a folded paper from her coat pocket, already written, already waiting. She didn't hand it to him directly. Instead, she placed it inside his guitar case, like all the times she had left coins. But this chimney, it held something far more valuable. And then she turned and walked away. No backward glance, no delay. He didn't call out, didn't run after her. Somehow, he understood. This was not a goodbye. This was a pause, a breath between songs. He waited until the station cleared before picking up the note. His hands trembled not from the cold, but from anticipation. The paper was folded carefully, precisely. No smudges, no tears. It had weight, not in mass, but in meaning. He opened it slowly. The way you open something sacred. It was handwritten in looping, slanted script. You asked why I stopped coming. I told you part of it, the part about the song, my brother, the grief. That was true. But there's another reason. And I didn't know how to say it out loud. Not then. Maybe not even now. I started coming back because I wanted to see if it was just the song that moved me or the voice behind it. And then it became clear it was you. But I didn't know if I could carry both things at once. Memory of him and the feeling that was starting to grow when I watched you sing. The song that reminded me of loss was also the sound of someone new arriving. It terrified me. So I stopped. I needed to know if I mattered to you the way you were starting to matter to me. If you would notice I was gone. If you would wait. When you played that song again, after so many days of silence, I cried. And when I saw you waiting, just like I asked, I knew. This isn't a love letter. Not yet. It's a thank you for giving me a reason to come back into the world, for singing through your own silence, even when no one stayed to listen, for not letting the echo die. If you still want to see me, I'll be back. Not just to pass by, not just to drop coins, but to stand still beside you and maybe sing a little too. I can't promise I won't be afraid, but I won't disappear again without a song. M. He read it once, twice, then again. M. Just that. No full name, but that single letter felt more intimate than a dozen paragraphs. He folded it back up and tucked it into the pocket of his worn jacket, feeling it settle against his chest like a heartbeat. For a long time, he didn't move. Not because he was confused or heartbroken or lost, but because, for the first time in a long while, he wasn't. The subway walls seemed softer somehow. The lights less harsh. The cold tiles beneath his feet had warmth in them now, because someone had seen him. Not just the performer, not just the busker filling silence with melodies, but him, the man who had been waiting for something without knowing what. He packed up slowly, carefully. The guitar went back into its case, the coins and bills into a side pouch, but the note that stayed close. He didn't play the next day or the day after. Instead, he walked above ground, through streets he hadn't visited in weeks, past bookstores and coffee shops and flower carts overflowing with late-blooming lilies. Everywhere he went, he saw her. Not literally, but in the way light curved around corners, in the pages of a book left open in a shop window. In the gentle tune a street violinist played near the park, he kept replaying her words in his mind. The song that reminded me of loss was also the sound of someone new arriving. That line alone had retuned something inside him. He had spent so long believing his music was a relic of a failed dream background noise in a world that didn't have time to stop. But now he saw that it had been more than that. His voice had been a bridge from her grief to her return, from his loneliness to this new, unknown path. A few days later, he returned to the station, not to play, just to sit. To watch, to see if she would come. She didn't. Not that day. But he wasn't discouraged, because he understood something now. There's a silence that follows every song. Not because the music ends, but because it needs space to breathe. Space to resonate. She was in that silence now, and she would return when she was ready. So he waited. He began journaling again. Not just lyrics, but thoughts. Letters to no one. Letters to M. Sometimes he even wrote songs that weren't meant to be sung, just to be read. To her, days turned into a week. Then 10, he kept returning. Sometimes to play, sometimes just to be present. And then, one Thursday morning, as he was tuning his guitar, she appeared again, this time with her own worn, smaller than his, but unmistakably hers. She stood across from him. No words, just that same small smile. Then she stepped forward slowly and sat beside him. She tuned her strings. He watched in awe, not wanting to break the moment. Finally, she looked at him and said quietly, "I don't know if I remember all the chords." He smiled. "That's okay. I know them by heart." She took a breath, and together they began to play. No coins were dropped that day. No one clapped. But in the space where the melody rose and fell, something beautiful happened. The silence between songs became a song itself, and two voices once separate, once waiting, found each other in perfect harmony. There are chords that stay with you long after they've faded, just as there are people who enter your life without warning, shift the rhythm of your days, and leave you listening for echoes that no one else hears. But there's something even quieter, even deeper than the music itself. The waiting that follows. He had always believed that the space after a song was the loneliest part of performing. That moment when the last note fades. The last word rests, and the silence wraps around you like a question. Will anyone clap? Did they understand it? Did it reach someone, anyone? Or was it just another forgotten melody in a city that never stops moving? But now, as he sat beside her in the tunnel, guitars in hand, the waiting was no longer hollow. It was full of breath, of memory, of the closeness between two people who had once only existed in glances and coincidences. They had played a song together, her first in years, his first that felt like a duet in more ways than one. No sheet music, no choreography, just feeling. And after that final note, she didn't get up. Neither did he. They waited. Not for applause, not for coins, but for each other. For the silence to do what silence does best, hold the truth that can't be said out loud. It was she who broke it first. "I forgot how much my fingers hurt after just one song," she said, smiling as she shook out her hand. "How do you do this every day?" He laughed, soft and low. "Calluses and maybe stubbornness." She looked at him, tilting her head slightly. "You know, I never thought I'd play that song again. Not after everything." He glanced sideways. "I'm honored you chose to share it with me." She let her eyes rest on the crowd for a moment. "I used to sing it in the kitchen, just me and my brother. He'd bang on pots and pans pretending they were drums. We were awful, but we thought we were brilliant." There was warmth in her voice, but it was tinged with sorrow, like light filtered through dust. He didn't push her to say more. Instead, he offered the only thing he had: silence. And then, Gently, she added. I think he'd like that. I played it again. Here, with you. He nodded. Then let's keep playing it. Not every day, but when it feels right. She smiled. That half smile that didn't need to say thank you because everything in her eyes already had. For a few days. That's exactly what they did. She started showing up more regularly. Sometimes she'd bring coffee 2 cups, even when she wasn't sure he'd be there. Other times, she brought her guitar and joined him for a set. On the rare occasions she didn't play, she sat on the cold tile floor and listened, as if no one else existed in the tunnel. Word began to spread. Regular commuters started lingering. Not long. Just a few seconds more than before. A nod, a smile, a hush of appreciation between stops. One afternoon, a little girl dropped a hand-drawn picture into the guitar case. 2 stick figures with guitars and big, uneven smiles. He looked at her, surprised. You sure this isn't your fan? Em leaned over and pointed at the slightly taller stick figure. That one has your messy hair. He laughed. Guilty. In time, their silent audience grew. Not in size, but in depth. The subway became a theater without walls, and the silence between their songs became their heartbeat. But just when things started to feel steady, real, like a melody finally resolving its final note, something shifted again. It started subtly. Im began checking her phone more often. She would trail off mid-sentence. Her eyes would linger at the tunnel entrance, like she was watching for something or someone. One day, she didn't bring her guitar. The next, she didn't come at all. He waited, played solo, watching each passing face with a flicker of hope. The third day, she returned. Quiet, distracted. When he finished the set, he sat beside her and asked gently, Everything okay? She hesitated, then nodded. Just something from the past showed up. I need time to think. He didn't ask more, didn't push. He knew what it was to need time. But that night, he read her old note again. The one she left in his case weeks ago, as if searching it for clues. This isn't a love letter. Not yet. The words echoed louder now. What if it never became one? What if the silence between their songs returned, but this time without music to follow? A few days later, she texted him for the first time. A simple message. I'm sorry, I've been distant. Can we meet somewhere else? Not the station. He replied instantly. They met at a small park above the subway, where autumn leaves were beginning to fall, like confetti from invisible hands. She was already seated on a bench when he arrived, her hands clasped together like she was holding something fragile. He sat beside her, waiting. She took a deep breath. My brother's birthday is next week. He said nothing, only nodded. I haven't been back home in years. Not since the funeral. But my mother called. She wants me to come. She said they replaying that song at the memorial. She looked at him, tears trembling just behind her lashes. I'm afraid, she whispered, afraid that if I go back, everything I've built here, everything we've started, will disappear. He reached out, placing his hand over hers. Songs don't disappear, he said. They evolve, and we carry them even in silence. She looked at him, then really looked, and in her gaze was all the weight of the silence between the verses. I don't want to lose you, she said. You won't, he replied, because I'm not just here when you're singing. I'm here when you're not. She cried then softly, like a song with no words. And he held her until the wind swept the leaves between their feet. She left that weekend, no promises, no guarantees, but with the quiet understanding that some things, like the final chord of a shared song, deserve to linger. He returned to the station alone, played their songs solo, waited after each one, and though she didn't return immediately, he wasn't afraid anymore, because the silence wasn't empty now. It was filled with memory, with meaning, with her, and he knew. When she was ready, when her own silence had played out, she'd return. Because that's what music does. It finds its way back, even after the final chord. The days that followed were quiet, not the kind of quiet that echoed with absence, but a quiet full of meaning. The kind that holds space for someone even when they're not there. He returned to the station each day, guitar slung across his back, and played not because she was watching, but because she had watched, because her presence had changed the meaning of every note. She had gone home, to a place heavy with memory, to a song that once broke her, and he remained rooted in the same spot that had once been a stage of anonymity, now transformed by the memory of shared chords and the imprint of her voice beside his. He played their song every day. Once, no more, no less. And after the final chord, he waited. Not out of desperation, not out of fear, but out of trust. Trust that music, like love, always circles back to its origin. The world around him didn't stop for his waiting. The trains still came and went. People hurried past with their burdens and distractions. But in the brief moments between songs, something changed in how he was seen. A woman in her 50s stopped one day and whispered, "You sing like you're waiting for someone." He nodded gently. "I am," she smiled. "She must be worth it." "She is," he replied. "And he was." He kept her note in his jacket still, the ink slightly faded, the paper soft at the creases. He didn't read it every day anymore. He didn't need to. Every word had already etched itself into his memory. This isn't a love letter. Not yet. But maybe now. It could be. 2 weeks passed before he saw her again. It was late afternoon. The light in the tunnel had softened, slanting through the far-end entrance in golden stripes. He had just finished the last note of the song, let it hang for a moment longer than usual, when he felt a presence behind him. Not hurried, not unsure, just familiar. He turned. She stood there. No guitar, no coffee cups, no coins. Just her, and a small, nervous smile on her lips. "Hi," she said. His breath caught. Then he smiled, slowly. "Hi." He didn't run to her, didn't speak too quickly. There was something sacred about that moment, the way the tunnel seemed to hush for their reunion. "I thought maybe," she started. "I knew you'd come back," he said gently. She stepped closer. "I didn't expect it to feel the same." "Does it?" he asked. "No," she said. "It feels better." She sat beside him on the floor, right where she used to listen. For a while, they didn't speak, just listened to the sounds of the city breathing around them, to the footsteps and the train brakes and the wind curling through the cracks. Then she looked at him and said, "I played it at home." He didn't ask if she meant the song. He knew she did. They cried, she added, not because they were sad, but because I was playing it again, for the right reasons. He reached into his case, pulled out his guitar, and held it across his lap. "Play it with me," he said. She hesitated. "Now," he nodded. "Now," she looked at him, then the instrument, and then nodded slowly. He passed it to her. She strummed softly, tentatively, at first, the strings responding to her like old friends. He pulled out a second guitar, smaller, a gift from a fellow musician he'd once helped on a cold morning. Together, they began the song. No microphones, no fanfare, just two voices, shaped by pain, warmed by hope, weaving into one. It was different this time, not because of the harmony, but because of the pauses. They didn't rush them. They let the silence breathe between verses, let the melody hold space for all that had passed. The loss, the waiting, the wondering. Everything they hadn't said was in those rests, in the space between lyrics, in the way their eyes met over the fretboards. A small crowd began to gather, not the usual passersby, but people who had heard the song before, who had felt the shift in the way he played it alone, and now noticed the shift again, with her beside him. A man left a single red carnation in the guitar case. A child clapped too early, then giggled and clapped again. And when the final chord fell into the air like a feather, the applause was quiet, reverent. The kind of response music always hopes to earn, not from grandeur, but from truth. She looked at him, tears in her eyes, but smiling. "That," she said softly, "felt like a beginning." He nodded. It was. They stayed in the station until the lights flickered for closing hours. Then he walked her to the top of the stairs, where the night waited with city lights and the scent of late dinners and possibility. She paused, took his hand, and reached into her coat. He thought she might be handing him another note, but instead, it was the original, the first one. "If you truly want to find me, play that song one last time, and wait." She handed it back to him. "You kept it," she said. "Of course." She smiled. "Can I tell you something? Always. It was never a test. I wasn't trying to trick you. I was scared. I didn't know how to ask someone to wait for me." He squeezed her hand gently. "You didn't ask. You invited." They walked in silence for a few blocks, letting their steps fall in rhythm. Then she asked, "What do you think happens next?" He glanced at her, then up at the sky just beginning to show its stars. "I think," he said, "we write a new song." "And what do we call it?" she asked. He thought for a moment, then smiled. "The silence between songs." She laughed, the sound so natural, so unburdened, and nodded. "Then let's write it," she said. They never became famous, never made it to sold-out concerts or recording deals, but every Thursday, without fail, they returned to the station. Guitars in hand, smiles on their faces, and a song between them. Sometimes they sang together, other times one simply listened. But always, always, they left space for the silence. Because in that silence, they had found everything that mattered. And sometimes, when the crowd was light and the tunnel especially quiet, she would lean over and whisper into his ear, "Play it again." And he always did. Because some love stories aren't about grand gestures or declarations. Some begin and are sustained in the spaces between, in the glances, in the waiting, in the quiet echo of a note held just a little longer than necessary, in the silence between songs. End of story.